Don't forget to subscribe. Enjoy your viewing.
I never imagined the day would come when my heart would shatter into 1,000 irreparable fragments. My name is Marcus, and what follows is the raw, unfiltered account of the most painful betrayal of my life. I had always believed that trust was the cornerstone of any relationship, a belief that was dismantled when I discovered that Elena, the woman I loved and devoted my life to, had been unfaithful. The revelation crept in slowly, like a dark cloud obscuring a once bright sky, transforming every moment into a harbinger of despair and rage. It started with small, almost unnoticeable changes. Elena, who had once been warm and attentive, gradually became distant and secretive. I began to notice how she would clutch her phone tightly, how her eyes would dart away when I casually asked about her day. I dismissed these signals as mere quirks or temporary lapses, clinging to the notion that our love was invincible. I believed that nothing could shake the foundation of trust and honesty on which we had built our life together. Yet, beneath her quiet smiles lay a deception I was too blind to see. As the weeks passed, her late-night outings became more frequent, and her excuses grew more elaborate. Meeting an old friend, she would say, or staying late at work. The inconsistencies in her explanations gradually piled up until doubt began to gnaw at my certainty. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling that lurked in the back of my mind, choosing instead to recall the countless shared memories, the laughter over candlelit dinners, the gentle comfort of whispered promises during long walks. I told myself that love was resilient, that a few unexplained absences could never tarnish the bond we shared. But fate has a way of unmasking the truth. One quiet evening, as I was tidying our study, I discovered a hidden phone tucked away behind a stack of old books. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and an inexplicable dread, I unlocked it. What I found there were intimate messages, words laden with affection and promises of secret rendezvous. Each message was a stab to the heart, a reminder that the woman I had trusted with my deepest secrets was now sharing her affection with another. In that moment, the truth hit me like a tidal wave. Elena had been leading a double life. That night, I confronted her. I remember the hollow look in her eyes, the way she regarded me as if I were an inconvenient obstacle in her meticulously planned world. Our conversation quickly devolved into a bitter exchange of accusations and half-hearted denials. Elena admitted to the affair, her voice disturbingly calm, as if confessing was just another mundane detail of our lives. My world collapsed around me. I felt as though I were drowning in a sea of betrayal, each wave of emotion pulling me further into despair. In the days that followed, I oscillated between numbness and overwhelming anguish. Every memory we had created together was tainted by the sting of her betrayal. I replayed our moments over and over in my mind, each recollection now a painful reminder of the lies that had sustained our relationship. How could the woman who once held my heart so tenderly be capable of such callous deception? I questioned every smile, every whispered secret, and every promise of forever. It was as if my entire past had been a beautiful illusion, carefully constructed to hide the truth of our unraveling love. Seeking refuge, I wandered through the quiet corners of the park near my home, a place where I once found solace in nature's gentle embrace. The rustling of autumn leaves, falling silently to the ground, mirrored the slow disintegration of my trust. Beneath a leaden sky, I allowed myself to mourn the loss of what I believed was an unbreakable bond. The irony of love weighed heavily on me. It had the power to lift me to unimaginable heights, only to plunge me into the deepest depths of despair in its absence. Amidst this heartache, I began to glimpse a faint light of understanding. The betrayal, as excruciating as it was, forced me to confront the truth about myself and the nature of love. I came to realize that holding on to a relationship founded on deceit would only prolong the agony. The painful lesson was clear. Clinging to the past only ensured that the future would be tainted by the same sorrow. The journey toward healing, though daunting, required that I reclaim my dignity and rebuild my life from the ruins of shattered dreams. I spent long hours in introspection, grappling with the question of whether I had ever truly seen Elena for who she was. The self-blame was bitter, yet it was a necessary part of understanding the depths of our shared history. Trust, I learned, is a delicate flower that withers in the harsh light of betrayal. I could not undo the past, nor could I ignore the scars left behind by her actions. Each wound was a reminder of the fragility of human connection, a lesson I would carry with me into the future. Slowly, I began to channel my sorrow into a form of catharsis. I started writing, pouring every ounce of pain and confusion onto the pages of a journal. With each written word, I felt a step closer to reclaiming the parts of me that had been buried beneath the weight of betrayal. The act of writing became a quiet rebellion against the darkness that threatened to engulf me. Even though the memory of Elena's infidelity was indelible, I recognized that I had the power to shape my own destiny, a destiny that no longer needed to be defined by deceit. Now, as I sit in the quiet of the evening and reflect on those turbulent days, I feel an unsettling mixture of sorrow and resolve. I am painfully aware that the trust we once shared is now irreparably broken. The betrayal has left scars that will not fade easily, and the road to recovery is long and uncertain. Yet I also recognize that this painful chapter in my life is a precursor to a transformation I must embrace. The journey ahead is mine alone, a journey toward rediscovering the strength that lies hidden within and reclaiming a future defined by honesty and self-respect. I am Marcus, and these are the raw, unvarnished truths of the day my world fell apart. As I begin to step away from the ruins of our past, I know that every step is both an act of defiance against the pain and a promise to myself, I will not let betrayal dictate the course of my life. Though the scars remain as stark reminders of what was lost, they also serve as symbols of my resilience and determination to forge a new path, one where trust, once so dearly cherished, can be rebuilt again, even if only in fragments of what it once was. The confrontation with Elena had shattered the brittle remnants of my former life, leaving me to face the lingering echoes of betrayal. In the days that followed our explosive exchange, a heavy silence blanketed our home, a silence so dense it seemed to press upon every corner, suffocating the memories that once brought comfort. I spent countless hours wandering through the empty rooms, each one a testament to the life we had built together, now reduced to a painful reminder of deception. Elena had retreated into herself, her once vibrant eyes now guarded behind a mask of indifference. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, had turned into sparse exchanges laden with unspoken accusations. The air between us crackled with a tension that was impossible to ignore, an invisible chasm that neither of us could bridge. In the quiet of the morning, I would catch glimpses of her as she sipped her coffee in the dim light, her gaze lost in memories that I could no longer share. Unable to bear the suffocating proximity, I sought solace in the one place where I felt momentarily free, the quiet solitude of the local library. There, amid the rows of forgotten tomes and whispered voices, I found a temporary reprieve from the storm raging within me. I would sit for hours, buried in the pages of books that offered no answers but provided a welcome distraction from the incessant thoughts of betrayal. It was in that silent sanctuary that I began to piece together the fragments of my shattered identity, each book a small step toward reclaiming the man I once was. Yet, even in isolation, the painful memories of Elena's infidelity were inescapable. I recalled every conversation, every smile that now seemed tainted by deceit. I would replay our past like an endless loop, scrutinizing each moment for signs I had missed. My heart ached with the knowledge that the woman I had trusted so completely had concealed another life from me, a life that was as real as the one we had built together. Each recollection was a cruel reminder that the foundation of our relationship was built on lies, and every shared secret was a ghost that haunted our present. One rainy afternoon, as I walked the rain-soaked streets alone, I found myself unable to escape the memories that clung to the droplets sliding down the glass. The city seemed to mirror my inner turmoil, a vast expanse of gray, punctuated only by the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the stark reality of my situation. It was during one such storm that I encountered Julian, an old friend from better times, whose unexpected presence stirred both nostalgia and a bittersweet longing for a past unburdened by betrayal. Julian, with his easy smile and unspoken empathy, listened patiently as I poured out the tangled narrative of my heartbreak. His eyes, deep and understanding, did not judge me for my pain. Instead, they held a quiet acknowledgement of the universal nature of betrayal. "Marcus," he said softly, "sometimes the people we love reveal parts of themselves we never wished to see. But in that revelation, painful as it may be, lies the seed of a new beginning." His words, though well-intentioned, offered little comfort. I could only nod, knowing that the road ahead would be as treacherous as it was uncertain. Returning home that evening, I found Elena sitting in the living room, her posture rigid and distant. There was an unspoken agreement in the way we avoided each other, a tacit acknowledgement that the fragile truce between us was slowly dissolving. The space that once felt like a shared sanctuary had transformed into a battleground where every glance was loaded with resentment. I attempted to bridge the gap with tentative words of reconciliation, only to be met with curt responses that deepened the chasm between us. The tension escalated with each passing day, until even the simplest tasks became battlegrounds for our mutual discontent. Breakfast became a silent contest of endurance, and the once joyful rituals of our evenings devolved into uncomfortable routines. Our home, once filled with the warmth of shared love, had become a stage for an inevitable showdown, a conflict that neither of us could avoid. One evening, as twilight descended with an eerie calm, Elena and I sat across from each other at the dining table. The silence was oppressive, laden with the weight of every unsaid word and every suppressed emotion. It was then that she finally broke the silence. "Marcus," she began, her voice low and measured, "I think we need to talk about where we're headed." There was a finality in her tone, a subtle acknowledgement that the chasm between us had grown too vast to bridge. I leaned forward, my heart pounding, knowing that this conversation would define the next chapter of our lives. Our dialogue unfolded like a slow, painful dissection of every shared moment and every betrayal. Elena spoke of feeling confined, of a longing for freedom that had driven her to seek solace elsewhere. I listened, torn between the desire to understand her pain and the raw sting of betrayal that made forgiveness seem impossible. As she explained her perspective, I could not help but feel that her words were rehearsed, a carefully crafted narrative meant to justify her actions rather than truly convey remorse. The more she spoke, the more I realized that our love had been reduced to a series of compromises, each sacrifice paving the way for a fracture that could not be mended. By the end of that long, heart-wrenching conversation, it was clear that we had reached an impasse. The love that had once been our refuge had become the very weapon that drove us apart. Elena's desire for autonomy clashed violently with my need for loyalty and trust, creating a rift that seemed to widen with every passing moment. There was no path forward where both of us could find solace. Instead, we were destined to walk divergent paths, each marked by the scars of our shared history. That night, as I lay awake in the darkness, the magnitude of our inevitable separation became painfully evident. I could see now that our relationship was akin to a crumbling edifice, its once solid foundation eroded by years of concealed truths and shattered trust. The decision to part ways was not born out of anger alone but from the deep realization that we were no longer two halves of a whole, but rather two lost souls adrift in a sea of regret. In the weeks that followed, the process of disentangling our lives from one another began. The practicalities were as painful as the emotional truths we had unearthed. Sorting through shared belongings became a symbolic exercise, a division of memories, hopes, and dreams that were now irretrievably fragmented. Each item carried the weight of our past, and each separation was a final act of surrender to the unyielding truth of our broken bond. I found myself frequently revisiting the moments that had led to this inevitable farewell. The bittersweet memories of happier times clashed with the relentless pain of betrayal, creating an inner conflict that left me emotionally exhausted. Yet, amidst the turmoil, there was a grim sense of acceptance, a recognition that the only way to reclaim my future was to let go of what once was. The journey of healing, I realized, would be long and arduous, marked by the slow process of rebuilding a life from the remnants of a shared past. As the final day of our cohabitation approached, The air was thick with a mixture of sorrow and reluctant determination. Elena and I exchanged few words, each interaction now laden with the finality of our impending separation. The realization that our paths were diverging cast a somber pall over every aspect of our lives. We were no longer partners but strangers, bound only by the memories of a love that had turned to dust. In the quiet moments before dawn, as I packed the last of my belongings into a battered suitcase, I paused to reflect on the journey that had brought me to this painful juncture. The love that once seemed eternal had crumbled under the weight of betrayal, leaving behind only the bitter taste of regret and the solemn promise of a new beginning. The hostilities between us were not born out of vindictiveness alone, but from a profound realization that our souls had grown irreconcilably apart. Thus, with a heavy heart and a resolute spirit, I stepped out into the unknown, a man forever altered by the wounds of betrayal, yet determined to forge a future defined by honesty and self-respect. Elena's figure faded into the distance, a silent reminder of the irrevocable loss of what once was, as I embraced the uncertain promise of tomorrow. In the weeks following our painful separation, I found myself standing at a crossroads, one path leading deeper into the darkness of loss and betrayal, and the other promising an uncertain glimmer of renewal. The once familiar contours of my daily routine had shifted, leaving me to navigate an uncharted emotional landscape with a heavy mix of resolve and sorrow. Every step away from the life I had known was fraught with a bittersweet longing for what had been and a tentative hope for what might be. After leaving our shared apartment, I moved into a small, sparsely furnished place on the outskirts of the city. The modest dwelling offered a temporary refuge, a space where I could slowly begin to rebuild the pieces of my identity that had been shattered by Elena's betrayal. I decorated the walls with faded photographs of happier times, a painful reminder of both the love that once flourished and the painful echoes of what was lost. In that quiet solitude, I had ample time to confront the tumultuous emotions that swirled within me, each one demanding to be acknowledged and understood. Mornings became a ritual of self-reflection and tentative optimism. I started each day with a long, aimless walk through the city park, the crisp morning air serving as both a balm and a catalyst for clarity. The sound of rustling leaves underfoot and the gentle murmur of the waking city helped to steady my mind as I sifted through memories and reflections. It was during these solitary walks that I began to comprehend the complexity of my pain, a mosaic of anger, regret, and an unexpected sense of liberation. The betrayal had irreversibly altered our shared narrative, but it also granted me the chance to redefine who I was, free from the constraints of a love built on false promises. Work, too, took on a different hue in this period of transition. Once a source of satisfaction and pride, my career had grown monotonous as my heart wrestled with inner demons. I found solace in the small victories of daily tasks, each one a reminder that life continued regardless of the personal storm raging within me. My colleagues, aware of my recent ordeal, offered cautious encouragement, a nod here, a few kind words there, yet the unspoken question of "what now?" lingered in every interaction. In these moments, I realized that the process of healing was as much about rediscovering myself as it was about accepting the past. In the midst of this personal reconstruction, I also grappled with the unsettling sensation of loneliness. The silence of my new apartment was both comforting and isolating. The absence of Elena's familiar presence left an echoing void that no amount of distraction could fill. I sought to drown out that emptiness in various ways, delving into books, pouring myself into work projects, even revisiting old hobbies that once brought me joy. Yet, no matter how much I immersed myself in distractions, the memories of our shared life and the painful betrayal often resurfaced, unbidden and raw. During one such evening, as I sat alone at a dimly lit cafe, I encountered Amelia, a fellow patron whose gentle smile and empathetic eyes struck a chord within me. Our conversation began with trivial exchanges about the weather and slowly evolved into an exploration of shared experiences and vulnerabilities. Amelia's kindness was a stark contrast to the cold indifference I had come to associate with Elena in our final days together. She listened intently as I recounted my ordeal, her quiet understanding offering a fragile bridge between my despair and the possibility of moving forward. Although I was not ready to plunge into another relationship, her presence was a reminder that amidst the wreckage, there were still people who cared, and who might help me rediscover fragments of hope. Yet, even as I tentatively embraced this new connection, the shadow of my past remained ever present. There were nights when the old wounds would reopen with a vengeance, when the betrayal, the confrontation, and the bitter parting all seemed to merge into a single, unrelenting ache. I would lie awake, haunted by the sound of my own thoughts, each one echoing with the lost promises of our former life. It was during these long nights that I began to write again, journaling not as a means of reliving the pain, but as an attempt to understand it, to convert suffering into a language that could one day lead me to healing. The act of writing became my nightly ritual, a dialogue with my own heart. I poured my anguish and my hopes onto paper, sometimes writing pages that were raw and unedited, other times carefully crafting reflections that hinted at the man I longed to become. Through my words, I discovered that every betrayal carried with it a lesson, a hard-won truth about the fragility of trust and the resilience of the human spirit. I recognized that while the love I once shared with Elena was irretrievably lost, the scars left behind were not mere marks of weakness but emblems of survival and growth. Yet, even in this period of introspection, Elena's presence loomed large. In the sporadic encounters that occurred in the public spaces of our shared social circles, her eyes would meet mine with a mixture of regret and defiance. There was no longer any pretense of reconciliation or softened expressions of love, only the bitter acknowledgement of a past that could not be undone. Every accidental meeting served as a stark reminder that, despite the physical distance we now maintained, our histories were inextricably intertwined. These encounters, though brief, reopened old wounds and forced me to confront the raw remnants of betrayal that I was determined to bury. One rainy evening, as I drove through the empty streets, the city's neon lights blurred by the downpour, I received an unexpected message from Elena. The message was terse, devoid of any warmth, a mere acknowledgement that she too was navigating the aftermath of our severed bond. Reading her words stirred up a maelstrom of emotions, anger, sorrow, and a strange, almost wistful longing for the times when things were simpler, even if naively so. I wrestled with the impulse to respond, to reach out and reclaim some semblance of what we once shared, but ultimately chose silence. The message was a reminder that some chapters are meant to close, and that true healing often requires accepting that some doors, once opened, can never be relocked. As autumn deepened into winter, I gradually embraced the solitude as an opportunity for self-renewal. I enrolled in a writing workshop, determined to channel my experiences into stories that might resonate with others facing similar trials. In the process, I met individuals whose lives had been marked by loss and betrayal, and in sharing our narratives, I found a communal strength that made the process of healing feel less isolating. Each story, each shared tear and tentative smile, reaffirmed the idea that while love could be treacherous, it was also capable of inspiring profound personal transformation. Now, as I stand at the precipice of a new season in my life, I am not the same man who once clung desperately to the illusions of trust and loyalty. The journey through betrayal has been excruciating, yet it has revealed the depths of my resilience and the potential for renewal. The memories of Elena and the love we once nurtured will forever be etched in my heart, an indelible record of both the pain of loss and the beauty of growth. The crossroads I once feared has now become a path of self-discovery, marked by the realization that every ending, however painful, is also the seed of a new beginning. In the quiet moments before sleep, when the world is hushed and the weight of the day settles in, I remind myself that healing is not a destination but a journey, a slow, deliberate process of reclaiming one's identity from the shadows of the past. The bitter lessons of betrayal have taught me that while love can leave scars, it can also illuminate the strength and beauty that lie hidden within. And so, with cautious optimism and a heart tempered by sorrow, I continue forward, each step a testament to my determination to rebuild, rediscover, and ultimately, to love again on my own terms. The chill in the air that morning seemed to mirror the icy resolve that had taken root in my heart. After weeks of solitary reflection and hesitant attempts at rebuilding, fate had arranged one last confrontation, a moment destined to end what little remained between us. Elena and I had drifted into a state of cold, resentful silence, punctuated only by bitter memories and mutual regret. The time had come to face the truth: our lives were irreparably severed. It began with a terse phone call from Elena, requesting a meeting at the now familiar coffee shop where we once exchanged hopeful glances and whispered promises. I accepted, knowing that despite the overwhelming hostility, a final conversation was inevitable, a final reckoning of our shared past and the painful reality of our present. As I arrived, the muted hum of the early morning crowd felt like a distant echo compared to the storm that churned inside me. Elena was already seated, her posture rigid and her eyes guarded, reflecting a mixture of defiance and regret. The silence between us was heavy with the weight of years gone by. I could see in her expression that the person I once knew was now a stranger, warped by choices that had shattered the foundation of trust we had built. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling as I began, "Elena, we need to confront the truth. We're not just broken, we're beyond repair." The words spilled out in a torrent of raw emotion, each one laced with the bitter remnants of betrayal. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if preparing for the inevitable onslaught. "Marcus, I know you're hurting," she replied, her tone measured yet distant. "But what we had is over. I'm not willing to keep pretending that we can fix something that's been destroyed." There was no trace of remorse in her voice, only a steely determination to sever the ties that had once bound us together. The conversation spiraled into a dissection of every mistake, every moment of denial, and every lie that had led us to this point. I recounted the hours spent in despair, the nights of relentless journaling that attempted to make sense of a betrayal so profound it redefined my entire being. Elena listened in silence, her face an impenetrable mask that betrayed neither sympathy nor sorrow. When she finally spoke, her words were clipped and devoid of the tenderness that had once defined our interactions. "I did what I had to do to feel free," she declared, as if the concept of freedom justified the dismantling of everything we had built. Anger surged within me, a burning, uncontrollable fury that had been suppressed for too long. "Free?" I spat, voice rising with a mix of disbelief and indignation. "You call abandoning our vows and shattering our lives free? You chose deceit over loyalty, and now you expect me to simply walk away without feeling anything?" The confrontation reached a fever pitch, emotions colliding with a force that left no room for compromise. Every word exchanged was a dagger, each accusation a confirmation that love, once cherished, had turned into a weapon. Elena's eyes flashed with an intensity that bordered on hostility. "I'm done with the pretense, Marcus. I'm tired of being shackled by a past that suffocates me. I can't keep living in a world where my mistakes are continually used to justify someone else's pain." Her voice, sharp and unyielding, echoed in the silent space between us. There was no turning back, only the stark realization that we had reached the end of the line. As our voices grew louder and the words more biting, a mutual understanding began to crystallize amid the chaos. This was not a moment of reconciliation or a plea for forgiveness, it was an irrevocable decision to part ways, to sever the bonds that had once promised eternity. The love that had once united us was now nothing more than a battleground of scars and shattered dreams. In that moment, every shared memory, every stolen glance, and every whispered promise turned to dust, blown away by the unforgiving winds of our separation. Outside the window, the sky darkened as if nature itself mourned the loss of what could have been. The atmosphere was charged with a finality that neither of us could escape. With every word, the distance between us widened until it felt as though we were speaking across a chasm filled with the remnants of broken trust and irreparable loss. The conversation ended not with a gentle goodbye, but with the harsh reality of an excruciating parting, a parting fueled by resentment and the stubborn refusal to relive a painful past. After the meeting, I walked away from the coffee shop with a hollow sense of liberation. Each step felt heavier than the last, yet with every footfall, I was also distancing myself from a history that had bound me in chains. Elena's figure receded into the distance, her back rigid with resolve, a silent testament to the fact that our journey together had reached its bitter conclusion. In the days that followed, the finality of our decision became undeniable. Legal papers were signed with the same cold formality that had come to define our interactions, a formal recognition of the hostile separation between us. Friends and acquaintances, who had once shared in the warmth of our union, now whispered of the acrimony that had taken over our lives. The space once occupied by shared dreams and mutual aspirations was now a battleground marked by resentful goodbyes and irrevocable finality. I spent long hours reflecting on the events that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the subsequent isolation, and the painful journey toward self-reclamation, all of it had culminated in this stark moment of truth. There was no glory in our separation, only a profound sense of loss and the bitter acknowledgement that some wounds might never heal. Yet, amid the seething anger and the overwhelming sorrow, there was also a strange clarity. The hostile separation was not merely an end, it was a beginning of sorts, a chance to rebuild from the ruins without the weight of shared delusions. Now, as I stand at the threshold of an uncertain future, the ghost of our past lingers only as a reminder of the cost of broken trust. The love we once nurtured has been extinguished by betrayal, and the separation that followed is both a testament to our failures and a symbol of our liberation from a cycle of pain. I have learned that sometimes, to reclaim oneself, it is necessary to let go entirely, even if that means parting ways in the most hostile, irrevocable manner imaginable. The finality of our separation is etched into every part of my being, a scar that will forever serve as a reminder of a love betrayed and a bond irreparably broken. With a heavy heart and a mind resolute in its newfound freedom, I step forward into an uncertain tomorrow, carrying with me the hard-earned wisdom of a love that ended in the cold, unyielding shadow of hostile parting. The final chapter of our shared life has closed, leaving only the promise of individual rebirth amid the ruins of what once was.